This is not coffee, it's garbage.
Maybe the problem is you, not the coffee?
But before we continue, tell us, where are you watching from? We'd love to know how far our stories reach. That March morning, the Old Tower restaurant on Michigan Avenue in Chicago was unusually quiet. The waitress, Megan, nervously adjusted napkins on the tables, even though they were already perfectly arranged. The chef, Tom, peeked out from the kitchen, checked the time, and disappeared again behind the door. Everyone knew, it was Friday. And that meant only one thing. He was coming. The door creaked open, and a man in an expensive dark gray suit entered the dining hall. Tall, confident, with a neatly trimmed gray beard and eyes that seemed to evaluate everything around him. Victor Mitchell. A name spoken with respect in Chicago, and with fear in this restaurant. Several employees straightened up instantly. Megan grabbed a menu and was about to approach him, but Victor didn't even glance her way. He walked straight to his usual table in the far corner, the one by the window overlooking the old part of the city, always kept free for him even when the restaurant was packed. Victor Mitchell had been coming here every Friday for years. An influential businessman, owner of a large construction company, a man with money and connections. But money hadn't made him kinder. Quite the opposite, with every passing year, he became more demanding, arrogant, and rude. He never said, please. Never said, thank you. And if something was wrong, and something always was, he'd humiliate the staff. Sometimes with words. Sometimes with money, throwing bills onto the table like an insult. Sometimes just with a look, full of contempt. Everyone was afraid of him. Even Andrew Dawson, the manager, preferred to stay away from the dining area on Fridays. But that day he wasn't there. Andrew was at a meeting with suppliers, the senior staff were busy in the kitchen preparing for a banquet, and the only waitress in the hall was the new girl, Natalie Walker. She had been working there for only 3 weeks. She'd come from the small Illinois town of Springfield, a quiet, provincial place where everyone knew each other. After her grandmother died, Natalie had nothing left but an old house and memories. She decided to start fresh, moved to Chicago, rented a room in a dorm on the outskirts, and got a job at the Old Tower restaurant after seeing an ad. Natalie was polite, precise, and hardworking. But she had one quality that set her apart: she wasn't afraid to speak her mind. Her grandmother had raised her to believe that dignity wasn't just a word, it was what kept you standing tall. It was Natalie who approached Victor's table with her notepad and a polite smile. "Good afternoon. What would you like to order?" Victor didn't even lift his head. He scrolled through something on his phone in silence. Natalie waited patiently. 10 seconds. 15. Finally, without looking up, he said, "Coffee. And make sure it doesn't taste like gas station sludge, like last time." Natalie froze for a moment but kept her voice calm. "Of course, I'll bring it right away." She turned and walked toward the counter. Megan, standing nearby, whispered quietly, "Natalie, be careful with him. That's Mitchell. He can cause a scene over the smallest thing. Just do what he says and stay quiet." "I'm already doing what he asks," Natalie replied evenly. "But I'm not required to tolerate rudeness." Megan sighed. The new girl still didn't understand who she was dealing with. A few minutes later, Natalie returned with a cup of freshly brewed coffee. She placed it in front of Victor and stepped back. The man took a sip, grimaced, and suddenly slammed the cup back onto the table. Coffee splashed everywhere, dark liquid soaked the tablecloth and splattered onto nearby tables. Several guests flinched. The restaurant fell silent. "This is garbage," Victor shouted, his anger spilling over. "What kind of mess is this? Where's your manager? Where's the owner?" Natalie looked at the spilled coffee, the stained tablecloth, and his furious face. Something tightened inside her, but she didn't lower her gaze. Instead, she met his eyes, calmly, firmly, and said clearly, "Are you sure the problem is with the coffee, and not with you?" The room froze. Someone at the next table gasped. Megan turned pale. Tom, peeking out from the kitchen at the noise, stopped dead in the doorway. No one, had ever dared to talk to Victor Mitchell that way. His face flushed red. He jumped up, his chair screeching across the floor. "Do you even know who you're talking to? Everyone here knows how to treat me. You have no idea who you've just challenged." Natalie didn't move. She stood straight, as if in front of just another rude customer, not a powerful millionaire. And you have no idea who you've met today, she replied softly, but confidently. For the first time in many years, someone had dared to talk back to him. And everyone saw it. This isn't over. Victor exploded, pulling out his phone. I'll make sure you never find work again. You're finished, do you hear me? Finished. More staff members rushed out of the kitchen, drawn by the commotion. At that same moment, outside the Old Tower restaurant, a black car pulled up to the curb. From it stepped an elderly man in an elegant light gray overcoat, holding a carved walking cane. Mr. Peter Mason was on his way inside. The story had only just begun. One of the waiters, an old acquaintance of Victor's, ran out from the kitchen, trying to defuse the situation. Mr. Mitchell, please, forgive us. The girl is new, she doesn't know how we treat our regular clients. We'll fix it right away, bring you another coffee, everything just as you like. Natalie felt a painful tightness inside. This was worse than the client's rudeness, it was betrayal. Her coworkers weren't just silent, they were groveling before this man, forgetting their own dignity. They were ready to sacrifice her just to keep their generous customer. Victor smirked, sensing victory. He slowly sat back down, leaned against the chair, and looked at Natalie with smug disdain. You know what, girl? Today you'll learn who I really am. I promise, this is your last day here, maybe even your last day working anywhere decent. He dialed a number on his phone, probably Andrew Dawson's. Natalie swallowed hard. Her hands trembled slightly, but she kept them clenched at her sides. She didn't lower her head. She stood straight, feeling dozens of eyes on her. Some looked at her with pity. Some with anxiety. Others simply watched, like an audience at a free show. A middle-aged woman at a nearby table, Mrs. Helen Grant, a regular guest, stood up, walked over to Natalie, and said quietly but firmly, "Don't let him break you, dear. It's about time someone put that bully in his place. Good for you." Natalie nodded gratefully. Those words gave her strength. She wasn't alone, there were people who saw the truth. But Victor raised his voice again. "Get that insolent girl out of my sight. Or I'll throw her out myself." The scandal had grown too intense to ignore. Several guests pulled out their phones and started recording. In today's world, any conflict could become public in minutes. Victor strode to the bar and slammed his fist down. "Where's your boss? Where's Mason? Call him immediately." The bartender stammered. "He's not here right now, Mr. Mitchell." "Then I'll call his superiors. I'll call everyone I need to." Victor barked out a harsh laugh. "No one treats me like this. I'll make sure this girl never gets a job again. I've got plenty of connections in the city." Natalie stood in the middle of the dining room. Her apron was splattered with coffee, her eyes were shining, but she didn't cry. She took a deep breath and said loudly, so everyone could hear, "If you want to ruin me, say it to my face. But I won't stay silent. I don't have to tolerate rudeness just because you have money." At that moment, the restaurant door opened. On the threshold stood an older man in a light gray suit, holding a carved cane, his calm yet commanding gaze sweeping the room. His arrival was so unexpected that everyone immediately straightened up. "What's going on here?" he asked in an even but firm voice. It was Mr. Peter Mason, the real owner of the Old Tower restaurant. A man whose name in Chicago was synonymous with integrity and fairness. The one who, 20 years earlier, had been the mentor of young, ambitious Victor Mitchell and had helped him build his business. Victor turned pale. For a few seconds, he couldn't say a word. Then he tried to compose himself and speak in his usual confident tone, though his voice trembled. "Mr. Mason? This new waitress was disrespectful. You know how this place has always treated me. I don't understand how you can allow this. I've invested a lot of money in your establishments, brought dozens of clients here." But Mr. Mason raised his hand, stopping him. The gesture was calm but carried unmistakable authority. "Victor, sit down." It didn't sound like a request, it was an order. The room fell completely silent. You could almost hear the traffic outside on Michigan Avenue. Natalie, still not fully understanding who this man was, stood tall, her eyes steady. She was ready for whatever would come. If she was fired, so be it, but she wouldn't bow her head. Mr. Mason turned toward her, studying her carefully. And in his eyes, she saw not judgment, but respect. "You're the new waitress, correct?" he asked. "Yes," Natalie nodded. What's your name? My name is Natalie. Natalie Walker. For a moment, Mr. Mason hesitated, as if that name meant something to him. Then he nodded. Thank you for your courage, Natalie. You may continue your work. Those few words completely changed the atmosphere in the restaurant. Victor jumped to his feet, his face twisted with outrage. Are you seriously taking her side? I've invested millions in your business. I've brought dozens of important clients here. And she's just some waitress. Mr. Mason slowly turned toward him. His voice remained calm, but each word struck like a hammer. And you, Victor, have forgotten what respect means. This young woman showed more decency in a few minutes than you have in the last 5 years. I don't need your money if it's built on humiliating others. Victor's face froze. For the first time in years, he had nothing to say. He had been exposed, publicly, in front of everyone. A few guests began to applaud quietly. Mrs. Helen Grant smiled at Natalie. The restaurant staff exchanged relieved glances. Someone had finally told the tyrant the truth. But Victor wasn't going to give up so easily. His pride, wounded and bleeding, demanded one last blow. This is betrayal, he roared. Do you know who I am in the city? I'll destroy this restaurant. I'll make sure no decent person ever comes here again. No one talks to me like that, not you, not that servant girl. Then, for the first time, Mr. Mason raised his voice. Not much, but enough for everyone in the room to feel the weight of his words. That's enough, Victor. Take one more step out of this room with those threats, and you'll never be welcome in any of my establishments again. From this moment on, you're persona non grata here. And remember, your reputation now depends not on me, but on all these people who just saw who you really are. Victor stood there, breathing heavily. His world, so comfortable and predictable, where money solved everything, was collapsing before his eyes. He turned sharply, knocked over a chair, and stormed out, slamming the door so hard the glass rattled. A few people kept filming on their phones. The video was already on its way through messengers and social media. Natalie stood frozen, unsure of what to feel. Relief? Fear? Gratitude? Mr. Mason approached her. I know today was difficult for you. You didn't expect this kind of day. But I promise you, as long as I'm here, no one will ever dare speak to you that way again. His words touched her deeply. For the first time since her grandmother's death, Natalie felt protected, seen, respected. Thank you, she whispered. No, thank you, Mr. Mason replied with a smile. People like you are rare these days. He turned to the staff. Everyone can go back to work. Then he walked up to his office on the second floor. A few days passed. The story spread through Chicago like wildfire. The video of the argument at the Old Tower restaurant hit social media within an hour of the incident. By evening, it had 10,000 views. By morning, 50,000. 3 days later, it had surpassed 200,000. People were sharing, commenting, arguing. Most admired the young waitress who had dared to stand up to one of the city's most feared men. Finally, someone put that bully in his place, wrote some. A heroine of our time, said others. That's what true dignity looks like, added a third group. There were also those who criticized Natalie, calling her rude or ungrateful, but they were the minority. The truth was obvious. The video clearly showed Victor throwing a cup of coffee, insulting the girl, and acting as if he owned the world. Victor Mitchell's reputation was falling apart. On Monday morning, one of his major business partners, the owner of a large logistics company, called him. Victor, I hate to say this, but after that video, I can't keep working with you. You understand, I have a reputation to protect. I don't want my brand associated with, well, you get it. Victor tried to justify himself, to explain that everything was taken out of context, that he had been provoked, but the partner had already made up his mind. On Tuesday, he was rejected from a bid for a new residential construction project. Officially, for technical reasons. Unofficially, the organizers said it outright, we don't want any scandals. Your name is all over the city, and not in a good way. On Wednesday, he was asked to step down from the board of a charitable foundation. Your presence compromises our mission, they told him. For the first time in many years, Victor Mitchell realized that money couldn't fix everything. The pride he had built for decades was crumbling in just a few days. And the worst part, he had no idea how to stop it. He sat in his large office on Jefferson Street, looking out the window at the snowy skyline of Chicago, and for the first time in a long while, he wondered, what if they were all right? What if he really had become someone everyone feared, but no one respected? But his pride still wouldn't let him admit it out loud. Meanwhile, something remarkable was happening at the Old Tower restaurant. Instead of losing customers because of the scandal, the place became more popular than ever. People came just to see the waitress who had dared to stand up to a millionaire. Some simply wanted to show their support by being there. Some brought flowers. Others left generous tips with notes saying, "Thank you for your courage." One elderly woman even sent a box of chocolates with a card, "Good job, dear. Stay strong." Natalie never expected such a reaction. She was just doing her job, serving politely, smiling, trying to be helpful. But people saw more in her than just a waitress. She had become a symbol. A symbol of dignity. A symbol that it was possible to stand up to injustice, even if you weren't rich or powerful. One evening, a middle-aged man in a sharp suit approached her table. Natalie recognized him, a well-known Chicago lawyer often seen on TV. "Good evening," he said. "I'd like to have a word with you, if you have a minute." "Of course," she replied, a bit surprised. "My name is Mr. Robert Harris. I saw the video. I just wanted to tell you that you did the right thing. People like Victor Mitchell need to be put in their place. And if he ever decides to sue you or harm you in any way, call me. I'll represent you for free." Natalie was moved to tears. "Thank you. I don't even know what to say." "You don't have to say anything. Just keep being yourself." Moments like that were many. The city seemed to wake up, realizing that justice still existed. But not everyone shared that joy. On Wednesday morning, a man in a black suit came to the restaurant. He introduced himself as Mr. David Collins, the lawyer representing Victor Mitchell, and demanded to see the owner. When he was shown into Mr. Mason's office, he got straight to the point. "My client believes that your employee overstepped her authority and publicly humiliated him. Mr. Mitchell is willing to avoid taking legal action if you dismiss the waitress and issue an official apology." Mr. Mason leaned back in his chair calmly. "Your client behaved like a bully. He threw dishes, insulted my staff, and threatened people. It's all on video, hundreds of thousands have already seen it. And you're asking me to fire the only person who had the courage to stand up for her dignity? My client has suffered serious reputational damage." "Your client damaged his reputation himself. Tell him there will be no apology and no dismissal. If he wants to sue, let him. I have all the security footage." The lawyer pressed his lips together, turned, and left without saying goodbye. That same afternoon, a young, energetic journalist from the Chicago Daily Journal stopped by the restaurant, holding a recorder in her hand. "Good afternoon. I'm looking for Natalie Walker. I'd love to ask her a few quick questions." Natalie came out from the kitchen, slightly uneasy. "That's me, but I'm not sure I want to give an interview. Just a few questions. People want to know your story. You've become an inspiration to many." Natalie hesitated, then agreed. After her shift, they sat down at a table in the corner of the dining room. "Tell me, Natalie, did you expect such a reaction?" "Of course not. I just couldn't stay silent. My grandmother raised me to believe dignity matters more than money." "Weren't you afraid of losing your job?" "I was. But the fear of losing myself was stronger." "Many people call you brave." Natalie thought for a moment. "I don't think I'm brave. Bravery is when you're afraid but still do what's right. I just couldn't act any other way." "And how do you feel about Victor Mitchell now?" "Pity," she said honestly. "When someone behaves like that, it means there's emptiness inside them. They try to fill it with power, money, humiliating others. But it doesn't work. I feel sorry for him." The words were so sincere that the journalist forgot her next question for a moment. The next day, the interview was published online. Another wave of reactions followed. People admired not only Natalie's courage but also her wisdom. Victor Mitchell read the interview in his office. He stared at the screen, unable to take his eyes off the words, "I feel sorry for him." Pity. She pitied him. It was worse than any insult. Worse than contempt. He slammed his mouse onto the desk, walked over to the window, and looked out at snowy Chicago. For the first time in many years, he felt something unfamiliar. Shame. Over the past week, he had lost 3 major contracts. He had been asked to resign from the board of a charitable foundation. One by one, his partners withdrew from their collaborations. Even his own employees looked at him differently now, cautiously, but without the old fear. His empire, built on money and connections, was collapsing. Because he had finally learned the truth, respect can't be bought. And without respect, money is just paper. Another week passed. On Saturday evening, when the Old Tower restaurant was packed with guests, an elderly woman walked in. She was dressed simply, an old coat, a knitted scarf, warm boots, and held a modest bouquet of chrysanthemums. Her eyes found Natalie, and she walked toward her. "You're that young woman, right? The one from the video?" "Yes, that's me. How can I help you?" The woman handed her the bouquet. "Please take this. It's for you." "Thank you, but may I ask why?" The elderly woman smiled through tears. 30 years ago, I worked as a waitress. One night, a drunk customer grabbed my hand and insulted me. My manager took his side and told me the customer is always right. I stayed silent. Endured it. But I've regretted that moment my entire life. She gently took Natalie's hand. "You didn't stay silent. You did what I couldn't. Thank you. From all of us." Natalie hugged her tightly. Both women cried. On Monday, a luxury car pulled up outside the restaurant. From it stepped a well-dressed woman in her mid-40s wearing a business suit. "Good afternoon. I'm Mrs. Linda Carter, owner of a coffee shop chain here in Chicago. I saw your interview. I'd like to offer you a position as manager at one of my cafes. The salary is twice what you're earning now, plus bonuses." Natalie was stunned. I don't know what to say." "Think about it," Mrs. Carter said, handing her a business card. "Call me if you decide. People like you deserve to be valued." When she left, Megan rushed over. "Did you hear that? Manager. Are you going to say yes?" Natalie looked at the card. "I don't know. I feel good here. Mr. Mason gave me a chance, supported me. I don't want to betray that." "That's not betrayal, that's career growth." But Natalie hesitated. That same day, something else happened. Later that evening, a young man in his 30s entered the restaurant, athletic, confident, with a warm smile. He scanned the room and walked straight to Natalie. "Good evening. Are you Natalie?" "Yes, I am. Would you like a table?" "No, I wanted to meet you." He extended his hand. "My name's Daniel Reed. I saw the video, how you stood up to Victor Mitchell. That was impressive." Natalie blushed slightly. "Thank you, but I was just doing my job." "That was more than just a job. It was a statement." He smiled. "I know it's unusual to approach you like this, but I thought, why not try? Maybe you'd like to grab a coffee sometime?" Natalie hesitated. In recent years, she hadn't had time for a personal life. Her grandmother had been sick, and she'd had to work and care for her. After her death came the move, a new city, a new start. I don't know. I'll have to think about it." "Of course," Daniel said, handing her his business card. "Here's my number. Call me if you feel like it, no pressure." He left, and Natalie stood there in confusion. Megan immediately ran up. "Oh wow. He's handsome. And polite. Natalie, you're not going to turn him down, are you?" "I'm not sure. I'm just not thinking about that right now." "Not thinking about it? You're 25. When will you think about it if not now?" Natalie laughed. "We'll see." Days passed. Life at the Old Tower restaurant began to settle again. Natalie was getting used to her unexpected fame, though inside she remained the same modest girl from Springfield. Daniel's card had been in her jacket pocket for a week. She'd taken it out several times, turned it over in her hands, but never found the courage to call. Part of her found him kind and respectful, but another part had learned to be cautious after everything she'd endured. But on Saturday evening, as she was walking home after her shift, her phone rang. An unfamiliar number. "Hello? Good evening, Natalie. It's Daniel. We met last week at the restaurant." Natalie stopped in the middle of the sidewalk. Light snowflakes drifted through the air, and the streetlights cast a soft glow on the empty street. "I remember. Hello. Sorry for calling so late." Daniel's voice carried a smile. "I just thought, maybe you wouldn't call me yourself. The offer for coffee still stands. No pressure. Just a conversation." Natalie hesitated. A voice inside her whispered, "Why do you need this? You already have enough to worry about. But another voice, the one that once belonged to her grandmother, gently replied, Sweetheart, you're too young to close yourself off from the world. All right, she finally said. Let's meet. Perfect. Tomorrow afternoon? I know a cozy little cafe in Lincoln Market. Deal. When she hung up, her heart was racing faster than usual. Her first date in, 3 years? 4? Maybe her first real date ever. Back in Springfield, there had been no time for romance, her grandmother was sick, and life was full of responsibilities. The next morning, Natalie woke up feeling unusually nervous. She went through her modest wardrobe, trying to decide what to wear. She chose a simple dark blue dress and a warm beige jacket, nothing fancy, but neat. The cafe turned out to be small, with wooden tables and the smell of freshly baked pastries. Daniel was already waiting by the window. When he saw her, he stood up and smiled. You came. I was afraid you'd change your mind. I almost did, Natalie admitted, sitting across from him. They ordered coffee and croissants. For the first few minutes, they talked about little things, the weather, the city, the cafe. But soon, the conversation grew deeper. Tell me about yourself, Daniel asked. Where are you from? How did you end up in Chicago? Natalie thought for a moment. She usually didn't like to talk about personal matters, but something in his eyes made her feel she could trust him. I'm from Springfield. A small town where everyone knows each other. I was raised by my grandmother. She was a teacher, very strict, but fair. She passed away 6 months ago, and I was left completely alone. So I decided to start over. I moved to Chicago, got a job at the Old Tower restaurant, and, well, you know the rest. What about your parents? Natalie wrapped her hands around her cup. My mother died when I was 5. My father left right after that. He said he couldn't handle it. Gave me to my grandmother and disappeared. I'm so sorry, Daniel said sincerely. Don't be. I made peace with it a long time ago. My grandmother replaced everyone for me. She taught me the most important thing, never lose yourself, no matter what. Daniel nodded. It shows. The way you stood up to Victor Mitchell, that wasn't just bravery. That was strength of character. And what about you? Natalie asked, wanting to change the subject. Daniel chuckled. My story's far less interesting. Born and raised here in Chicago. My parents are ordinary people, my dad's an engineer, my mom's a doctor. I graduated from college, work for an IT company, I'm a programmer. He shrugged. A regular life of a regular guy. Then why did you approach me that day at the restaurant? Natalie asked. It was unexpected. Because I saw something in you that's missing in most people, honesty, courage, integrity. He looked her in the eyes. You know, I'm tired of people pretending, putting on masks. But you're real. Natalie felt her cheeks flush. I just don't know how to be any other way. And you shouldn't learn. They talked for more than 2 hours. About books, both loved the classics. About the city, about dreams, about life. For the first time in a long while, Natalie felt she could simply be herself. No pretending, no walls, no fear. When they finally left the cafe, it was already dusk. Can I walk you home? Daniel asked. No need, I live far, on the edge of the city. All the more reason. What kind of man would let a woman walk alone at night? Natalie laughed. All right. Just to the subway. They walked through the snowy streets of Chicago, and Natalie suddenly realized she hadn't felt this light in years. It was as if the weight she had carried for so long had finally begun to lift. At the subway entrance, Daniel stopped. Thank you for tonight. I really enjoyed being with you. Me too, Natalie admitted. Can I see you again? You can. He smiled, gently squeezed her hand, and let go. Then until next time, Natalie. Until next time, Daniel. As she went down the subway steps, Natalie caught herself smiling, just because. Or maybe, because there was a reason after all. The following week, they met again. And then again. Daniel turned out to be attentive and patient. He didn't push, didn't demand, didn't rush her. He was willing to wait until Natalie was ready to open up. One evening, as they walked through Chicago at night, they stopped on Lakefront Bridge. Below them, dark water flowed quietly. In the distance, the city lights shimmered. Do you know what I dream about? Natalie asked, looking into the distance. What's that? A family. A real one. Not a perfect one, that doesn't exist. But one where you're loved, where you matter, where you can be weak and no one judges you. She sighed. All my life, I had to be strong. There wasn't another option. My grandmother was old and sick, I had to be her support. But sometimes I just wanted to be a girl. Daniel wrapped his arm around her shoulders. You have every right to be vulnerable. Always. That doesn't make you any less strong. Natalie leaned against his shoulder. They stood in silence, listening to the city sounds. Tell me honestly, Daniel asked softly. What do you feel for me? Natalie paused, choosing her words. I feel peace. With you, I don't have to pretend to be strong. I can just be myself. And that's worth a lot. Is that a good thing? Yes. A very good thing. He turned her toward him, looked into her eyes. Can I kiss you? Natalie nodded. Their first kiss was gentle, careful, as if they were afraid to break something fragile. But it was filled with such warmth that Natalie realized, for the first time in her life, she wasn't alone. Weeks passed. Their relationship developed slowly but steadily. Daniel often came to the Old Tower restaurant after her shifts, walked her home, brought her coffee in the mornings. Megan joked, Natalie, you're in trouble, guys like that are rare. But there was still a shadow between them. Natalie couldn't fully open up. Daniel sensed it. One evening, they were sitting in her small but cozy dorm room. Snow was falling outside the window. What's holding you back, Natalie? Daniel asked. Why can't you let go completely? She stared at the snowflakes drifting down. I'm scared, she said honestly. Scared of getting used to this. Scared of believing it's real. Because everyone I've ever loved has left. My mother died. My father abandoned me. My grandmother passed away. I'm afraid to get attached, I couldn't bear another loss. Daniel came closer and hugged her from behind. I'm not going anywhere. I promise. No one can promise that, she whispered. Then let's just live in the moment. Not thinking about tomorrow. Here and now. He kissed the top of her head. Here and now, I'm with you. And that's real. Natalie turned and held him tightly. Thank you. For being here. They stood like that for a long time, holding each other, until darkness settled completely outside. One late evening, as the last customers were leaving, a car pulled up to the restaurant. A man stepped out wearing a dark jacket with the hood up and walked toward the entrance. The security guard tried to stop him, the place was closing, but the man quietly said, I need to see Mr. Mason. Tell him Victor Mitchell is here. The guard raised an eyebrow but called upstairs. After a short pause, Mr. Mason allowed him in. Victor climbed to the second floor, entered the office, and pulled down his hood. Mr. Mason saw a completely different man from the arrogant tyrant he had known a month earlier. The man standing before him was broken, his face gaunt, his eyes dull, his hair streaked with more gray. Sit down, Victor, Mr. Mason said calmly. They sat across from each other at the heavy oak table in silence for a while. Victor stared at the floor, unsure how to begin. I've lost everything, he finally said hoarsely. Contracts. Connections. Reputation. Partners won't work with me. Clients are leaving. Employees are quitting. Banks won't renew my loans. My company's on the verge of bankruptcy. He lifted his eyes. And do you know what's worst, Peter? I realized I deserved it. Every bit of it. Mr. Mason listened quietly, without interrupting. For the last 20 years, I built an empire, Victor continued. I thought money could fix everything. That being rich meant I could do whatever I wanted. I humiliated people, crushed their dignity, thought they were nothing. But now I see that without respect, money is just paper. His voice trembled. You were right that day. That girl showed more dignity in a few minutes than I have in my entire life. Tell me honestly, can anything still be fixed? Or am I beyond saving? Mr. Mason leaned back in his chair, folded his arms, and studied Victor's face for a long moment, trying to tell whether he was sincere, or if this was just another performance. You can always change, he finally said. But it won't be easy. And it won't be quick. You have to prove it, not to me, not to this city, but to yourself. Prove that you can be different. How? Victor asked, almost desperately. How do I do that? Start small, Mr. Mason replied. Apologize to the people you've hurt. Not in words, in actions. Help those who need it. Not for publicity, but because it's the right thing to do. And most of all, learn to respect people. All people. No matter if they're rich or poor. Victor listened intently, absorbing every word. It's a long road, Mr. Mason added. You can't fix in a week what you've destroyed over years. But if you truly want to, start today. Where do I start? With that young woman, Natalie. You humiliated her in public. Apologize to her in public. Victor went pale. You want me to, publicly? If you really want to change, yes. Victor slowly stood up. All right. I'll do it. When? Friday evening. The restaurant will be full. Come then. Say what you need to say. Victor nodded and left. Mr. Mason remained alone. He walked to the safe, opened it, and pulled out an old box of photographs. No one knew his secret. A few days earlier, after talking with Natalie in his office, he couldn't get her words out of his head. Irene Walker. Victor Mitchell. A daughter abandoned. He began to remember. 25 years ago, Victor had been his protégé, back then, a different man. Young, ambitious, kind. He often showed pictures of his wife and little daughter, even gave Mr. Mason a few photos of them. He had been proud of his family. Then his wife died. Victor broke down. He drifted away from everyone. Mr. Mason moved to New York City to expand his business, and they lost touch. And now, years later, working in his restaurant was a young woman named Natalie Walker. 25 years old. Mother died when she was 5. Father, Victor Mitchell, abandoned her. Coincidence? Or? Mr. Mason found the old photograph, faded and yellowed. A young Victor, a beautiful woman with kind eyes, Irene, and a little blonde girl, no more than 3, in her arms. He studied the child's face, then closed his eyes, recalling Natalie's. The same eyes. The same features. The same expression. God. It was her. Victor's daughter. And he had humiliated his own child, without even realizing it. Mr. Mason sank into his chair, gripping the photo tightly. What now? Should he tell Natalie? But how? How do you tell a girl that the man she's hated all her life was sitting in her restaurant, and neither of them knew it? And Victor, he was planning to come back, to apologize, to make things right, yet he had no idea who he was apologizing to. No. It was too soon. Far too soon. First, Victor had to prove that he was truly capable of changing. That there was still something human left in him. Only then, when the time was right, could he reveal the truth to both of them. Painful, terrible, but necessary truth. Mr. Mason placed the photograph back in the safe and shut it. His decision was made. He would wait. Watch. And when the time came, he would tell them who they really were to each other. Friday came quickly. The Old Tower restaurant was full, as it always was at the end of the week. Natalie was serving tables, smiling, chatting with Megan. She was in a good mood. Tomorrow Daniel had promised to take her out of the city, to show her a beautiful spot outside Chicago. Around 8 in the evening, the door opened, and Victor Mitchell walked in. The chatter died instantly. Everyone turned to look. But Victor looked different. There was no arrogance left in him. He was dressed simply, dark pants, a sweater, a jacket. He walked to the center of the dining room and stopped. Natalie, stepping out of the kitchen, froze. What was he doing here? Victor looked around the room and spoke loudly. Good evening. I know many of you recognize me. I'm the man who caused a scene here a month ago. I've come to apologize. The room fell silent. Especially to you, Natalie, he turned toward her. I was rude. I humiliated you. I was wrong. Please forgive me. You reminded me of something I had forgotten, that dignity can't be bought, and respect must be earned. Natalie stood there, unsure what to say. I'm not asking you to forget, Victor continued. I'm asking for a chance, to prove that I can be better. She slowly walked toward him. I accept your apology. But words are only the beginning. Prove it through actions. Victor nodded. I promise. He left, and the restaurant burst into applause. Natalie stood still, feeling an odd uneasiness. There was something about this man, something strangely familiar. But what? She couldn't understand. Upstairs, in his office, Mr. Mason watched everything through the window, holding the old photograph in his hands. Soon, very soon, it would be time to tell them the truth. A few days passed. Victor Mitchell didn't show up at the restaurant, but Mr. Mason heard from mutual acquaintances that he was indeed changing. He had stopped shouting at employees. He had personally apologized to several former workers he had once humiliated. He had even donated a large sum to a children's home, quietly, without any publicity or press. Maybe he really was changing. But Mr. Mason knew, the real test was still ahead, when Victor learned whom he had actually hurt. On Saturday evening, as Natalie was finishing her shift, the administrator came up to her. "Natalie, Mr. Mason would like to see you in his office." She was surprised, he rarely called her in so late, but she nodded and went upstairs. She knocked. "Come in." She entered and saw Mr. Mason sitting behind his desk, his expression serious. In front of him lay an old photograph, face down. "Sit down, Natalie. I need to talk to you about something serious." She sat down, her heart pounding with anxiety. Something was wrong. "Do you remember our conversation a few weeks ago? When you told me about your parents?" "I do," she nodded, not understanding where this was going. "You told me your mother's name was Irene Walker, and your father was Victor Mitchell. You said he left when you were 5. "Yes, but why are you asking?" Mr. Mason picked up the photo and slowly turned it over, placing it in front of her. "Take a good look." Natalie took the photo with trembling hands. For several seconds, she said nothing. It showed a young woman with kind eyes, a small blonde girl of about 3, and a young man with his arms around both of them. They were smiling, happy. That's my mom," she whispered. "And me. Oh my God, I was so little. Where did you get this photo?" "Look at the man next to your mother," Mr. Mason said quietly. Natalie focused on the man's face. He was smiling, holding his wife and daughter close, his eyes were full of warmth and love. His face was young, different, yet something about the eyes, the shape of his jaw, the expression, and suddenly it hit her like a shock. Her heart stopped. Her breath caught. "No," she whispered, dropping the photo. "No, that can't be true." "Yes, Natalie. That's your father. Victor Mitchell. 25 years ago, when he was a different man. When he had a family he loved." Natalie stared at Mr. Mason, her face pale as paper. "You mean, that man, that customer who humiliated me, who yelled at me, who threw coffee at me?" "Yes. That's your father. The same Victor Mitchell who abandoned you 20 years ago, and who, just a month ago, insulted you without even realizing who you were." The photograph slipped from Natalie's hands onto the floor. She covered her face, and a muffled, painful sound escaped her chest, a cry filled with disbelief and unbearable sorrow. "No. Oh God, no. That's impossible. It's a nightmare. I knew Victor 25 years ago. I was his mentor. He gave me that photo back when he was proud of his family. Then your mother died, and he changed. I lost touch with him when I moved to New York City. I only came back 3 years ago. And when you told me about your parents, I realized the truth." Natalie breathed unevenly, tears streaming down her face. "He didn't even recognize me, his own daughter. He humiliated me. Yelled at me. Spilled coffee on me. And he didn't even know. How? How can someone forget their own child so completely that they don't even recognize her? He hadn't seen you in 20 years. You changed. You took your mother's last name. He wasn't expecting to meet you. But that's not an excuse, Natalie, it's only an explanation." She lifted her head. Her face was streaked with tears, her eyes red, but they burned with fury. "Why did you tell me this? Why? I wish you hadn't. I wish I never knew. Now I don't know what to do with this. Because the truth is always better than lies, even when it hurts. And because both of you still have a chance to make things right. If you want to. Make things right?" Natalie jumped to her feet. "How? He abandoned me. Forgot I even existed. For 20 years, I lived without a father, no call, no letter, not a single dollar of help. And then I meet him by accident, and he treats me like garbage." Her voice broke. She was crying. Mr. Mason stood and gently wrapped his arms around her, like a father comforting a child. "Cry, sweetheart. Go ahead and cry. You have every right to." For several minutes, Natalie just stood there and wept. She cried for the little girl who had lost everything. She cried for all the years of loneliness. She cried for her grandmother, who had raised her alone. She cried for all that could have been, but never was. Finally, her tears subsided. She stepped back and wiped her face. What now? Now it's up to you, Mr. Mason said quietly. I can tell Victor the truth. I can arrange a meeting between you two. Or I can do nothing at all. Natalie was silent for a long time, staring at the photo on the floor. Tell him, she finally said. Let him know he humiliated his own daughter. Let him live with that knowledge. And do you want to see him? Yes. I want to look him in the eye. I want to ask him, why? All right. Tomorrow evening. Natalie left the restaurant in a daze. When she reached her room, she called Daniel. He arrived 20 minutes later. What happened? And she told him everything. Daniel listened quietly, not interrupting, only holding her tighter. I'm so sorry, Natalie. So incredibly sorry. I don't know what to do. I hate him. And at the same time, something inside me hurts. Like a little girl still waiting for her dad to come back. You have the right to feel whatever you feel, even if those feelings contradict each other. So what should I do? Meet him? Forgive him? That's your choice alone. But you know what? You're the strongest person I've ever met. Whatever you decide, it'll be the right thing. Natalie pressed against him. Thank you. For being here. I'll always be here, he whispered. I promise. The next day, Natalie called Mr. Mason. I'm ready. Tell him I know. And that I want to meet him. Tonight. That evening, after the restaurant closed, Natalie sat at a table by the window. Her hands trembled. Her heart pounded. The door opened. Victor Mitchell walked in. He looked even more worn down than before. When he saw her, he stopped. You wanted to see me? Natalie nodded, unable to speak. Victor approached and sat across from her. The silence stretched endlessly. I just wanted to tell you again, Victor began, his voice low. I'm sorry for how I acted. I was a monster. Do you know who I am? Natalie interrupted coldly. Victor blinked, confused. You're? Natalie Walker. The waitress. Natalie Mitchell, she said clearly. Daughter of Victor Mitchell and Irene Walker. Victor froze. His face turned pale. His lips trembled. What did you just say? Natalie pulled out the photograph and placed it on the table. Look at it. Victor took it with shaking hands. That's my Irene and my little Natalie. But how? He looked up at Natalie. Stared. And suddenly he saw it, the same eyes, the same face, the same expression. Oh God, he breathed. It's true? You're my. Yes, Natalie said coldly. I'm the daughter you abandoned. The one you forgot. The one you humiliated a month ago without even recognizing. Victor dropped the photo. He covered his face, and a broken sound escaped his chest. No. Dear God, no. I couldn't have humiliated my own daughter. But you did, Natalie's voice trembled. You yelled at me. Threw a cup at me. Called me names. And you didn't even recognize me, because you didn't care. No. Victor raised his head, his face wet with tears. No, Natalie. I did care. When your mother died, I broke. Every time I looked at you, I saw her. It was unbearable. I was afraid I couldn't handle it. And instead, you abandoned me. Natalie cried out. I was 5. I lost my mom, and then you. Every day I asked why my dad didn't love me. Victor dropped to his knees before her, clutching her hands. Forgive me, Natalie. Please forgive me, my little girl. I was a coward. A weak, selfish coward. I ran from pain, and only gave it to you instead. Give me a chance to prove I can still be a father. Natalie looked at him through tears. How can you fix 20 years? I can't. Those years are gone. But I can try to be here now. If you let me. Just give me one small chance. Natalie covered her face with her hands, sobbing. Inside her, a storm raged, hatred, pain, resentment, but something else, too. A small girl who had spent her whole life waiting for her father. Finally, she lowered her hands. I can't forgive you. Not now. Maybe never. This wound is too deep. But I'll give you one chance. Just one. Prove you've changed, not with words, but with actions. Victor grasped her hands. Thank you, Natalie. I promise. Don't call me that, she cut him off sharply. That name was only spoken by my grandmother. You've lost the right to use it. Victor nodded, swallowing the pain. As you wish. Natalie stood. I have to go. At the door, she turned back. Why didn't you ever try to find me? In 20 years? Victor lowered his head. Because I was afraid. Afraid of seeing in your eyes what I see now, contempt. And the longer I stayed silent, the harder it became. But I thought about you every day. Every single day. You know what's worst? Natalie said quietly. I almost believe you. And she walked out. Months passed. Victor truly began to change. He sold his large house and moved into a modest apartment. He donated the rest of his money to children's homes and shelters, anonymously. He became a volunteer at New Hope Children's Foundation, working every weekend. He personally apologized to every employee he had ever mistreated. Not everyone accepted his apologies, but he kept going. He didn't pressure Natalie, didn't call or write, didn't show up at the Old Tower restaurant. He simply waited, proving his change through actions. Natalie heard about it from Mr. Mason and from others. People in Chicago were saying that Victor Mitchell had changed. And something inside her began to thaw. One day, she called Mr. Mason. Tell him I'd like to meet. Just to talk. They met at a cafe on a Sunday afternoon. Thank you for coming, Victor said softly. I heard you've changed. I'm trying. Every day, I'm trying to be a little better. I have one condition, Natalie said. Tell me about my mom. I barely remember her. Victor smiled, sincerely, for the first time. Your mother was the kindest person I ever knew. She worked as a librarian and loved books. We met when I was 23. I walked into the library, and she smiled at me, and I knew right then she was the one. My destiny. He spoke for a long time, about their dates, how he proposed on a bridge over the lake, how she dreamed that their daughter would become a teacher. Natalie listened, tears streaming down her cheeks. She loved you so much. Her last words to me were, take care of our little girl. And I failed her. I failed you both. Natalie reached across the table and placed her hand over his. But you're trying to fix it. That already means something. Victor began to cry, from happiness this time. Thank you. Thank you for giving me a chance. Half a year passed. Their relationship healed slowly. They met once a week, talked, learned to trust each other again. Gradually, the ice melted. One warm evening in May, they sat together on a park bench. You know, Natalie said, sometimes it actually feels good to be with you. Really? Victor froze. Yes. You've changed. I can see it. And I'm grateful you didn't give up. Natalie, can I ask, will you ever be able to call me Dad? She thought for a moment. I don't know. Maybe someday. But for now, let's just be Natalie and Victor, two people building something new from scratch. That's enough for me. Natalie rested her head on his shoulder. Victor didn't dare move. In his mind, he heard Irene's voice, take care of our little girl. I'm trying, my love. I'm truly trying now. A year later, the Old Tower restaurant hosted a small evening event for its regular guests. Natalie, now the floor coordinator, stood by the entrance greeting visitors. Beside her was Daniel. They had announced their engagement a month earlier. Then Victor entered. Simply dressed, smiling warmly, holding a bouquet of flowers. These are for you. Congratulations on your promotion. Thank you, she said, smiling as she accepted the flowers. Come in. Your table's by the window. Our table, Victor corrected gently. Natalie nodded. Yes. Our table. Mr. Mason watched the scene and smiled quietly. Sometimes people really can change. Sometimes forgiveness is possible. And sometimes, what's been broken can be put back together. The cracks may remain, but it's whole again. If this story touched your heart and you'd like to help us keep sharing stories like this, click the Super Thanks button. It's the small heart icon with a $sign under the video. Every time you do, you help us create stories that inspire and remind people about dignity and kindness. Thank you for staying with us until the end of this story. Tell us in the comments which moment moved you the most. Subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss our next stories. Give this video a like if you believe in the unseen power of dignity and family. And before you go, watch the story we've left here on the screen, We're sure it will move you too and make you think.